Hello, listener. So, you like scary movies? Well, it is a creepy night, and with all those crazy lunatics out there, well, you really shouldn't be alone. Ooh, you look so freaked out right now. Now I suggest you listen very carefully. Subscribe to ClassHorrorCast, or I'll gut you like a fish. Enjoy the show. I'll be watching.
Welcome back to another episode of ClassHorrorCast. This week I'm joined by fellow podcaster, director, writer and lover of horror, Mike Pecci. From dreams at a young age of becoming a comic book artist to being a filmmaker and podcast host on his show In Love with the Process, he combines easy listening with actual advice from his own experiences and that of his incredible guests. Currently working on some amazing top secret projects that we may have gotten some hints about, we dive inside the mind of filmmaker Mike Pecci. Can you remember your first horror-related experience, or maybe your gateway into horror?
Jumping right in, huh? First horror related experience. Is this a movie question or is this a real life question?
I mean, either or if there's crossover.
Let's see. First horror related experience. I would say. I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies when I was a young kid. Mm-hmm. My mom never really let me do that. I was always enthralled with the video store. I used to go to the local video store, which was it's become this fabled place now that I talk about it. It's this old store that was small and cramped. It had like uneven floors and had all these like very tight, narrow aisles for video collections, and there was this aisle that I wasn't allowed to go down, which was the horror section, and it had like Hellraiser posters and all that kind of shit. And so in my mind I kind of built it up to being like this like mythical place. And as a kid I've always had pretty intense nightmares and pretty intense like waking dreams. And so when I was a kid, I used to dream. There's this dream that used to stick with me, come back all the time. I used to dream, and I had these eyes that would be looking in my window at me. I had these green eyes that would consistently be coming and haunting me. And I remember I couldn't tell whether or not I was awake or if I was asleep. And I would always like try to focus and find these green eyes. And that used to scare the shit out of me as a kid for quite some time. And then as I got a little bit older and I started to watch action movies with my mom, so we used to watch like Lethal Weapon and Die Hard and all that stuff. I had this reoccurring dream. Every one of my dreams, didn't matter how crazy my dream was, didn't matter if I was having like a romantic dream, like, if I was, dating, what's her name, from fucking, Adventures in Babysitting. I had such a huge crush on her. But my dreams would always end with a guy shooting me in the face. Always.
Jesus Christ.
For like the longest period of time. Like I would be in like the coolest spot, coolest dream, and someone would go, hey, and I'd turn and pow. And it was just always getting shot in the face. So dreams played a big part of how horror affects me, I think. And so when I saw two movies. I saw the first one was Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid, and I also saw Nightmare on Elm Street, like right at the same time. And for quite some time, they both kind of blurred for me because Dreamscape had the dude that went in the dream and had the claw hands, and he pulls the heart out of the president on the. And then Freddy Krueger obviously had the claw hands too. So those two movies really fucked with me, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had always suffered from pretty intense nightmare dreams.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's great when you're a kid. It's funny because I've talked to so many people, and Elm Street always gets brought up as something that either started off a lot of people or a first memory of being afraid. And I try to figure out what exactly that is. Obviously, Freddy is iconic, but do you think it's more to do with what you said, the crossover between actually having nightmares and then this nightmare guy?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Everybody was scared to shit out of Jaws, right? So when you went and saw Jaws, you're like, I'm not going fucking swimming. So like you see Nightmare on Elm Street and you can't say, I'm not going to sleep. Like no matter what happens, you're going to go to sleep and you're going to have to face that. And especially if it affects you at such a visceral level. And, you know, you're talking about a more innocent generation and a movie that was really pushing the limits of what that innocent generation had seen, you know, Johnny Depp getting like completely like butchered and blood spraying on the ceiling. And I saw recently, I was doing research on Wes Craven and how he came up with the Freddy theory. And it was an interesting doc. I forget where I saw it. I think it was on Netflix or something. But he was talking about how Freddy was influenced by a moment that he had as a little kid, probably about the same age I was when I was looking out that window and seeing those crazy eyes. And he was, I'm going to probably fuck this story up, but he was looking out his bedroom window and there was a drunk. There was this drunk, scary fucking dude that was walking down the street. And he was like in a dark window up in the corner, like no one could see him. And this drunk just stopped and looked right at him. And it freaked him the fuck out. And that character supposedly is the influence for Freddy. And I guess that drunk was wearing a fedora and had all the hat on it. And for quite some time, I think it was New Line Cinema was fighting him on the hat. And they're like, we shouldn't put him in that fucking hat. And he was at the last minute, he was like, put it in the hat because he was trying to scare himself. He was trying to bring that primal fear that he felt as a kid out.
Do you have anything like that you can remember? I know you had mentioned obviously the green eyes and stuff, but have you ever had any real life memory of something like that that's always kind of stuck with you?
What, like some sort of like horror event like his?
Yeah.
Here's another fun story. Years later, I think I was probably in my 20s. Years later, I used to live in Boston, so I was on the back of the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at my apartment and I was hanging out with a roommate, and we were watching a movie and a car alarm went off. So there was a car alarm that was off in the distance and it started to run. So we just sort of turned the movie up. Well, finished the movie, car alarm's still going off. And it's going off. It's been going off for a while. And you've now hit this point where it's like, do I call the cops? Like, what do I do? And so I remember we lived in like a shotgun apartment. So it was like, we had the top floor and then there was another renter on the bottom floor.
Okay, yeah.
And so I climbed down the stairs to go look. I go out to the front porch. And as I step out in the front porch, this guy steps up next to me. It was dark. It was nighttime. And he scares me. And I'm like, fuck. And it was my neighbor. And we're both standing there looking down the street in the direction of this car alarm. And so he's like, and I'm like, yeah. And so we both start to walk towards this car alarm. As we're walking down the street, it's like an autumn, New England cold night. And as we're walking down the street, one of the street lights is out. Now, I'm not making this up. One of the street lights is out over this driveway. And the car alarm is all the way down in the darkness on this driveway. Nope. So we hit the street light, we look, and I look down the driveway, and we start walking down the driveway towards this car. And as we're walking down the driveway, we see that the front door of the car is open.
Oh,
and the light's still going. The alarm's going. And I just go, nope. Nope. I ain't fucking doing this. I write shit like this. This is something I am not doing. See you later. I don't know if he went down there. I mean, he survived, so he probably didn't. But you get that gut feeling.
Yeah.
Where years later, I was doing it was autumn and we were shopping for pumpkins. We had to go to like a pumpkin patch.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the middle of the day. And it was like in an apple field, and it was this farm out basically in the countryside. And so we're driving out to this place. We find this fucking mailbox, and we have to drive through like these Tim Burton, Sleepy Hollow woods. We drive around the corner. We get to this spot, and there's like this big barn, a big old farmhouse, and like you're like slowly pulling your way in because chickens are getting out of your way and shit. So we pull into the spot, and the girl that I'm with gets out of the car, and I'm like, hello? Like there's no one fucking around. And she walks over to the farm door or the barn door, and there's like chains hanging and there's shit going on. There's all sorts of sharp shit in there. And she just like opens the door and she goes, hello. And I go, get in the fucking car.
Yeah, that's like the intro to
Every chainsaw killing. I'm like, just get in the car. This is not good.
Is that something that you find yourself now as a filmmaker and stuff? I don't want to say do you seek out those situations, but do you start to notice things like that more and then maybe use that as inspiration, I guess?
Yeah, what I'm consistently trying to do as a filmmaker is try to scare myself the way I used to be scared when I was a kid. And it's tougher because we're so cynical at this point, and it's like I don't believe a ghost. There's like all sorts of different things where you're just like, all right, I know what that is. So you're just consistently looking for that fear, and sometimes it sneaks up on you, and sometimes you find yourself in a position. And whenever I do, I'm always like, oof. I'm always like living within it as much as I possibly can and going, okay, how am I feeling right now? What's happening? And because I'm just logging it in emotionally. Because as a storyteller, that's essentially what you're doing as a filmmaker, is that you're having those experiences, and then I'm falling back on the techniques in the language of cinema to try to make you feel those same things without physically being in the same situation that I am, So it's fascinating. Whenever I find myself doing something like that, I'm always taking note and logging what I'm feeling emotionally, how my body feels, what I'm smelling, what I'm hearing. All those different things are just clocked away. And I'm like, oh, okay. So if I was going to recreate this, okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that. Is that something when you say, you take note of these situations or feelings or whatever it might be? Are you somebody who either uses an app maybe to take notes? Do you have a notebook? Is that something that you physically,
Yeah, sometimes I do. I mean, I've got this notebook. I was trying lucid dreaming for a little while, and it was just a thing that I unfortunately picked up while I was doing 100 other things. So I haven't really been able to stick with it. But I did buy myself a little note, like a little book, like a really nice little leather bound nightmare book. So that if I have a dream or if I feel like something's really affected me, I'll try to wake up and I'll write chicken scratch and try to like make notes of it. But if I'm out and about, I mean, if I feel something that I'm afraid I'm going to forget, then maybe I'll just record it and I'll just do like an audio recording, something like that. Like, I've told this story 100 times, but years ago, when I almost died. So I had like, I got into an accident where I cracked my skull. I went ice skating for the first time and I slipped and I cracked my skull, and I ended up having a fractured skull and a hematoma. And I ended up in intensive care, and they said you have 5 days, or they said you're potentially going to die, so you got to call your family and let them know. And I was in intensive care for 5 days, and so a hematoma is like a blood puddle that's pressing on your brain, so your brain starts to compress. And I started to have all like these crazy hallucinations and really strange waking dreams. I wasn't allowed to go to sleep. And so my girlfriend Gina was there, and I would just have all these visions, and I would say to her, like, just record this. I need to talk about what I'm seeing. And I would talk about all these crazy visions. And I had this theory that my inner voice was being controlled by something else. It wasn't my own inner voice. I was going crazy. And all that stuff became the inspiration for 12 KM. So like when I went through that head injury thing, that's where all the ideas came from.
That shit is scary. Just even here tell like the short version of what I'm sure is a long and probably horrible story. And yeah, it's like that shit is so scary. The thought of that's you're seeing these things, or you're having these visions and stuff like that, and there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy. I think that there's probably a big reason why I'm always playing around with dreams and with mental idea. Like I feel like sleep and dreams and your brain is like one of the final frontiers that hasn't really been you know, developed, or really hasn't been researched as much as everything else. Like it's you know, back in the day when people were trying to settle this country, they would tell horror stories and scary stories about, you know, the West Coast, about traveling, you know, with a wagon and fucking horses, you know, for months across this country, or you know, Jaws and underwater and all this stuff. And I feel like our subconscious is ripe for horror and for horror stories, and we rely so much on our inner voice, and we rely so much on what we believe, and all that is in our brain. And it's fascinating to me. It's like this, you can get real nerdy and scientific about it, and then you can also get really sort of spiritual and like ghost about it too, like very sort of I don't know. It's this fucking really great combination of stuff. So a bunch of my ideas, a bunch of my stuff is really rooted in the subconscious, and how scary the subconscious can be.
Yeah, it's and there's so many different aspects to a lot of that stuff. I think like I have family members who are schizophrenic. You mentioned lucid dreaming. Not to say that they're the same thing, but it's the mind is a scary, scary place, man. And I think and I find with some of your work as well, things can be made in such a way that interpretation sometimes is nearly scarier than actually showing somebody, you know, a guy with a machete. While I love that stuff, it's scarier to me that when the filmmaker kind of hands you the mic and just kind of goes, now you just think up in your own head what.
Well, but dude, even the stuff with the machete, I always like, okay, Texas Chainsaw, first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, great movie.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's really fucking great about it is that it was Toby Hooper, who was a documentarian. Like, he was doing documentaries before he did that movie. And so Texas Chainsaw feels like a documentary. It really does. And my favorite scenes in that movie are the ones left for interpretation. It's like, you know, fucking Leatherface twirling that chainsaw at the end of that thing. Like, that filmmaker's not coming out and going, he's mad at his childhood. You know, there is no the specific subtext to that. It's just this pure rage and anger. And you look at Halloween and Michael Myers, the original. The thing that's so great about it is that it's just evil, and it's unrelenting evil that is continuously getting back up and continuously chasing you down. And there's no explained reason for it. When Rob Zombie did them and he started to talk about his childhood and go through all that stuff, it wasn't as interesting.
Yeah.
Those are so typical Hollywood notes where it's like, can we humanize the fucking creature? And it's like, true terror isn't humanized. True terror is something that you can't explain. Look at H.P. Lovecraft, and where it's so hard for him to physically describe it as what it is that you see, but it's completely horrifying. That's why those movies, and cosmic horror is also really fascinating to me. Those movies are really hard to visualize because it's how do you come up with an image that we understand for something that we don't understand? It's weird. It's this weird dichotomy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times as well, and I hate when they do movies, if it's a rehash or a remake or whatever, and they over explain too much into something. It's like, while I did want more of this, I also didn't want you to, like you said about Rob Zombie, I don't know, it just felt like I was being told too much of how it actually is.
Yeah. And look, I like Rob Zombie stuff. I love his stuff. I just think that I would have preferred that movie to be more vibe. And with these films, it's more about technique more than anything else. And if you get like a great filmmaker that's really good at telling suspense and building vibe and building tone, and you're in it, I think that's why a lot of the horror movies from the 70s were so great, because they weren't necessarily dealing with these I need to explain everything fucking notes. And they were more like, how do I make this scary? How do I make this feel scary? And so then you get dudes like Sam Raimi, you get dudes like old Polanski movies. Fuck. It's like they just really scary vibe technique stuff. And you're seeing a lot of that come back today, like A24 is doing a lot of that. With The Witch and with Hereditary and all that kind of stuff. They're getting back to the vibe. But I miss technique. I really do. And this is something that I sort of strive for as a filmmaker, and a lot of my filmmaker friends and the people that I interview on the podcast, we're all very technique and obsessed with the visual language of cinema, and knowing that I could just take the simplest idea, and really scare the hell out of the audience with technique.
Mm-hmm.
That's, kind of my obsession these days.
And I guess growing up then, when did film really become like a big part of your life? And I guess at what point then after that did it become obvious to you that that's what you wanted to do?
It's weird, man. Like comic books were a bigger part of my life than movies were. And I think the big reason for that was that I was a terrible student, and I was grounded all the time. So I would get my grades, and my parents were like, no TV for you. And, I was one of four. And so, the kids, my brothers and sisters would go watch TV on Friday nights or after homework. And my parents were like, you're not allowed to be in here. You got to go up to your room. You're not allowed to watch television. And so I missed a lot of stuff as a kid, especially as I got into like middle school and high school. That whole period, I was just a shit fucking student, and I was consistently, I think I was grounded for like 6 years, just consistently. So I was reading comic books. That's where I would go to. I loved the comic book store. It was kind of like my own private place, and no one else in my family was really into it. And it was my own little church of like strange stories and like mythologies. And so I got deep into that, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. I used to like trace comic books and do sketches of books and sell them to my friends and do all that kind of stuff when I was a kid. And I'm like, all right, I want to be a comic book artist. So when I applied to art school, my grades were so terrible that they rejected me. They're just like, he's not getting into art school. And it was like a crushing moment where I was like, well, all right, well, fuck this. I guess I'm not doing that. And I was working in a music store at that time. And I said, well, I really like music, and so I'm going to stick with that. And then I decided years later that I was going to get into radio. I'm like, I think it'd be fun to be a DJ that introduces people to music, because I've always loved to do that at the music store.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my life. And so I went to school for that. And I remember I had my first radio show. I had a radio show on a local access radio network, or station rather. And it was super late at night. It was like, 2 a.m. or whatever. And the program manager came to me and he said, okay, so every 15 minutes you play the CDs with a blue sticker on them. And the bottom 15 minutes you play the CDs with the green sticker. And I'm like, why the fuck am I here? Like, what am I doing? If I'm just playing CDs with
it's like all predetermined.
Yeah. I'm like, what the fuck is this about? And so I happened to be taking for credits a film course. And so I started to watch in this film course, like Blade Runner I saw for the first time. I saw Citizen Kane for the first time. And I became obsessed with it. And there was this moment, because it was a different time then. This was like 1998 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, we didn't have YouTube. Behind the scenes videos weren't a huge deal. I remember like when Jurassic Park first came out, I was like, as a kid, I'm like, how'd they grow dinosaurs? Like, I had no fucking idea how these things happen. And so when I went to this film course, like light dawns on Marblehead, where I'm like, oh, there's someone in charge of like picking out outfits, and there's someone, of course. And I just never had thought about it, because I was such a wonderful audience member that really wasn't concerned with how any of this stuff was made. I just loved stories. I knew that there weren't fucking people in the TV. Like I wasn't an idiot, but I also didn't give a shit. Like I just liked the stories. I wasn't paying attention like today, where people are like, I don't like the fucking graphics. At that time, it was so magical. And you just were like, I love Indiana Jones. I don't give a shit how you fucking got Indiana Jones on my TV. I just love him. And so when I was in this film course, light dawns on the head where I go, oh shit, yeah, people need to do this. People are hired to do this. And I went, oh man, this is everything I love. Everything I love about comic books and telling a story within a frame. I'm doing that here. Still a two-dimensional frame, but things are moving, which is cool. And music and motion through music and all that's a big part of it. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I was full fucking throttle with everything that I love from all those other pieces. And then I studied real hard and I went, film schools are a thing. And we're starting to see the results of colleges in general here in the States, which is when we were kids, they would literally recruit you at a young fucking age. They would teach your parents that if your kid didn't go to college, they'd be worthless and they wouldn't do shit. And so they would have, I'm sure you had them there too, where they would put on, seminars and the colleges would show up and pitch these kids. And so when I didn't get into college initially, and it would have been expensive, I would have spent a ton of money to go to this art school. When I didn't get there initially, I was just like, well, fuck this. I'm going to make the most out of my life and do that. And years later, when I went to the community college that I went to, it was very inexpensive. And I went to my guidance counselor and I said to him, I want to do film. I just want to do it. This is what I want to focus on. This is everything. He goes, okay, it's a great choice. So you won't be able to be in a film class for 2 years. You have to take all these elective courses. And I was like, how much do each one of those elective courses cost me? And he's like, well, this price and this price. And I'm like, I don't need those fucking courses. Why am I paying you for those courses? Oh, so you stay accredited. As a school, you stay accredited and I'm paying you to fuck you. And so I just was like, I'm out. And so I bailed on that and I did the research. It was really hard to find a school that literally gave you a camera because most schools at the time, you can go to a film school with a bunch of other students and be a fucking boom op while the other guy gets chosen to be a director. And it's just like, what am I doing? And so I found, and I'm not plugging them, but I found New York Film Academy when they first started. And I took like their half-year course. And, they really didn't teach much. I ended up learning more about moving to New York, going to a city that I didn't have any connections or any family in. And I had to produce and direct 4 short films. And I had to work on the 4 short films of my 3 friends that I was paired with. So I became a cinematographer doing that. I learned how to shoot. Mm-hmm. I learned how to produce. And after I finished my half year in New York, I was like, oh, if I can do this in a city where I don't know anybody, let me go back to a place that I do know people. And so I moved back to Boston and I was there for 20 years. I had a production company. I directed music videos for huge bands. We wrote treatments for Ozzy Osbourne and we did, Kill Switch Engage and Meshuggah and like a Wu-Tang Clan and all that shit. And then commercials and then I did a couple of short films that I love, proof of concepts. I did 12 Cam and I did Who's There? Mm-hmm. And it's changed my world. I got representation and I moved to Los Angeles. And so that's everything.
Is that something that you would recommend to, I had a lot of messages when your name came up and, a lot of it revolved around advice or how do I get started? Should I go to film school? Should I go to college? Should I do this? Should I do that? Mm-hmm. I know there's no clear cut way and nobody's going to stand behind 100% on something, but is there a particular route that you would recommend, one versus the other?
I would say that the problem with our business is it's not like being a firefighter. If you want to be a firefighter, you go to fire academy, you go spend your time, you do your time on the trucks. Yeah. And the older guys are like, you do enough of this, kid, you'll be a firefighter. You know what I mean? Filmmaking is not that. Like all the paths are different. Everybody sort of gets in a different way. Yeah. And there are fucking millions of people that all want to do the same task that you want to do. So whenever I talk to people, and that's what my show is pretty much about, my podcast is about. Whenever I talk to people about their path, I always say, where do you live? Is there a film community where you live? Are there people, like-minded people that are in your space that want to do other things? Because filmmaking is collaborative. You need to have a crew. You need to have a team. Eventually, you're going to need to have all this.
Yeah.
You start just shooting with you and your friends and learn, which you should. But figure that out. And oftentimes I'll talk to people that are out in the middle of nowhere, and film school is a smart move for them, primarily because they get to go to where there are other people doing what it is that they need to do. They get to meet other crews, they get to do all that stuff. And for a lot of folks that go to film school, whether you go to like Vancouver, or if you go to New York, or if you go to London, or wherever the fuck it is that you end up most likely staying there. And so you stay there with your team and with your crew, and then you can roll into, work and for hire work and crew work and sort of make your way through. I could have done that when I was in New York. A bunch of my friends were like, we're going to stay. Do you want to stay with us? And I made the ballsy move and I went, no, I'm going to go back to where I'm from, which was so much harder to do. It was a longer process for me because Boston eventually had a huge movie scene because I got a great tax credit and everything changed that. But in the beginning, I had to make it all up. I had to put people together. I had to teach people. They had to teach. So it was like this system that took, fucking 20 years. Mm-hmm. I would say that film school, and this is a long answer to a short question. I would say that film school is right for some people, but take this into consideration. Whatever you're paying, you're not going to make back right away. And in our industry, you're expected to work for free for a lot of it for a long fucking time. And so if you have $100,000 in student loans behind you, what the fuck, man? And you're almost better off, taking the 25 grand or 65 grand or whatever it costs a year to go move to where you want to hang out with folks and then spend $20,000 and make a movie, because it's going to be more beneficial for you. So
is that something that you've had, your story, you've kind of, I think as you put it, made a lot of ballsy moves. And I find a lot of times nowadays, many people, I would say a lot of the population are, anxious about things, worry about the past, worry about the future. And so much so that I think people have now become obsessed with the art of, I guess, figuring something out versus actually trying to go through with it, if that makes sense. Studying or maybe reading 25 books a year on filmmaking, but never actually trying to make a film or whatever. Is that something that you've ever struggled with? Or have you always just kind of been like, you know what, fuck it, I need to go and do what I got to do?
No, I mean, I think everybody goes through that, dude. Like, when I first started and I got into it, I was so driven and inspired by my time in New York that I came home and I was full throttle. So I was just like trying to meet as many people as I could, go get as many jobs as I could, go do all that stuff. And then as I got older, I started a production company. I had a partner, and then that we were full throttle there, and we were going full throttle with music videos. And there hit this point where I wasn't making movies. So I was doing everything else. And initially, all those other things were just to keep me employed so that I could do movies. And I hit a point where I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not doing the thing I want to fucking do. And it really took me, smashing my skull and then ending up on death's bed, sort of looking at it going, all right, if I die today, I've had a good life. I've had great experiences. I've got a great family. I've got this girl that loves me. So the only regret I have is that I didn't make the fucking movie. I didn't do that. And so when I got better, that was my change. That was my that was my full fucking drive. So yeah, I think it's easy to get lost in the prep, and it's easy to get lost in the research. And at the end of the day, you just have to do it. And you always end up in these cycles of it, because this business always kicks you back to the curb. Every time you're done, every time you finish something, it's like, great, you're done. Now I'm unemployed again. Now I'm back at the beginning, and now I'm here and I have to find a way to get my shit together again. And so that's part of it. Like,
yeah,
I find myself in that position all the time where I'm just like, oh, God damn it, I have to start back over again with this fucking, right. And then, the bipolar nature of our industry, pitching ideas and trying to make movies. And yes, congratulations, you're doing this amazing thing. And then 3 hours later, it fell through. And so like, you're just this emotional train wreck. This is something that Ryan Conley from Film Ride and I really connect on, and we talk about a lot whenever we're together. The business really kicks your ass. And there are moments where you want to play by the rules, because if you play by the rules, then you get the money you need, then you get the access that you need, and then you get to work with the actors that you want to work with. But playing by the rules is this whole slow moving system that like you get stuck in, and it becomes like muddy, trudgy. It's been like 2 years, and what the fuck, you know what I mean? And then you forget about being a filmmaker, and you forget about why you love filmmaking, and you forget about like being on set and being in the edit room and all these really great things. And so then you're like, I guess I got to go back and do something on my own again, just so I don't forget that thing. But fuck you, like I want to do. So it's very angsty. You really need to have a good support system if you're going to get into this business, whether that's like a great family that will support you emotionally, or if it's a great partner that you're with that's going to support you emotionally and understand what you're going through. And you have to have a good support system for yourself, and consistently be working on yourself emotionally. And there's a reason why a lot of folks in our industry become alcoholics. There's a reason why a lot of folks in our industry get fucking depressed, because it really beats the shit out of you.
Yeah, it's something that it really I guess it sounds kind of morbid to say, it's interesting to me, and I always like to get different people's take on that, because I always hear of stories, of people, they want to chase a dream or they want to follow something, and if it's not, and it's not a knock on any of those things, but like you said, if it's not something clear cut, like I want to be a police officer and this is what I need to do, and there's an exact framework. And I always hear the stories of like people like, I lost my long-term girlfriend or fiance, or I don't want to say neglecting, but like I didn't have time for the wife and kids, or I this or I that, or everybody thought I was an idiot, and X, Y, and Z. And I'm always intrigued to find out how people try to spin all those plates.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, you have to become kind of a psychopath in order to pursue a dream, because there's a million reasons at any moment in the day when you're not supposed to do it. Like there's a million reasons why someone's going to show up and say, hey, you're not allowed to do this. This isn't your path. This isn't what you're supposed to do. And so you have to kind of be, innocently oblivious to that to a certain extent, and then just continuously pushing yourself forward. And it's tougher for some folks that have a lot of responsibilities. Like if you've got a kid, if you've got like mortgages, if you've got student loans, if you've got all this stuff that's breathing down your neck, it's just putting the brakes on a lot of that. And it's difficult. And then if you're someone like me, where early on I decided in my 20s that this is what I was going to do. So I was like, all right, so I don't give a shit about kids. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. I'm focusing heavily on this. You hit a point where like 20 years go by and you're like, fuck, I have been so deep in this thing that there's all sorts of like emotional trauma from that. And so now you're like trying to figure out, is this my whole life? Am I going to be 50 and, just waiting until a movie's made or waiting until this thing happens? How do I live my life at the same time? And that was kind of how I started the podcast like 4 years ago. Was I hit this point, it all comes to that head injury. Well, I hit my point in that head injury when I was thinking about my life, and my adult life was just sort of pinpointed by jobs, by like specific things that I did. So it was like, hey, remember when I did that music video? And that was the time that we did this fucking commercial. And that was the time that we did this sort of thing. And then the in-between, there was nothing. It was just these pins that were there. And I was like, man, most of my life, like 90% of my life is prepping for something and waiting on something. So I need to find joy in that. I need to find joy in those spaces between these markers and try to figure out. And that's why the show ended up becoming called In Love with the Process, because it is the process. You have to find a way to fall in love with all these little moments and these little things and these little bits, because those things are what your life is. It isn't, your life isn't the sum of your finished jobs or your movies or, your art. It's, how you get through every day and stay inspired, how you get through every day, and find joy in the monotony and joy in the brutal fucking path that you've chosen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you said, obviously, and I think it's a really good outlet for something like that. And it works perfect because, I mean, with the podcast being called In Love with the Process, I think it all kind of ties everything together. When you decided to start that, how, I guess I have a couple of questions. Number one, did you expect it to go as well as it's been going? Like, I mean, I find it is very hard to put together something like that consistently, and then also, have it get out there.
Yeah.
And I guess, did you have any anxieties maybe about putting yourself out there in that sense? You're talking about a lot of topics there that I would say even still in modern day, like a lot of people just think that you should just shut up and get your 9-to-5 job and you're an idiot. And so when you're saying these things about, how passionate you are about X, Y, and Z, or your advice or your ideas or whatever it might be, a lot of people probably think, you're a fucking idiot. Why are you saying that? We should just, be between these two lines and just go.
Hey man, like there's two ways to answer that. The simple way is like, I don't give a fuck. The simple way is like, I don't care what you think. But then there's another way where I have nothing but respect for everything. Before I got into this world, I used to paint houses. I was an airplane mechanic's assistant for years. I was working on cars for years. I mean, I would go home and be scrubbing, oil off my hands and dealing with cut up knuckles. That was my job. And so when I got into this and I decided that this was my path, I had this sense of anxiety every day that I would wake up and go, earn this. Like, what are you doing today to earn the fact that you're not painting fucking houses anymore? What are you doing today to earn this? And so that was this anxiety that was great to have to get myself motivated. And then it ended up haunting me, 20 years later, where was consistently dealing with this anxiety of like, what have I done today? And I haven't done enough and I haven't done this. And so it starts to change. So you have to adapt yourself to it as you get older. The podcast was something that I started because I used to, what happens in this business is that it takes, I say this, someone says that it takes like 10,000 hours for you to become a master at anything, right? I believe that in our business, it takes 8 years before anybody gives a shit about you, before anybody knows who the fuck you are. And those first 8 years are years where you're like hustling, you're working hard, you're learning the trade, you're learning the craft, you're learning about yourself, you're living your life, you're doing all that shit. It's relentless. And I had a lot of folks writing to me because once you hit 10 years, then people notice you. People know who you are. They see your work. They see your name around. Mm-hmm. And so I have a lot of young people writing to me consistently going, how do you do it? How do you do your shit? Like, how do you run a business? How do you do taxes? How do you do all that crap? And I would respond to them, but it just took a lot of fucking time. And I hit a point where I went, all right, so maybe I should do something where I collectively speak to these folks because there isn't a place for this. Like most podcasts, most YouTube channels, they're all put through some fucking filter of like, it's a genius lifestyle. And imagine all the actors you hang out with, the life shit. And like everybody that got an Instagram account that's a fucking, that's a cinematographer or a director these days. It's more about them posing with cameras.
Yeah.
Shit. And you're like, come on, man.
Yeah.
It's not what it's like. I know for a fucking fact, because I talk to a lot of those folks either that want to be on the show or come to me for advice and they go, I'm depressed. I'm like, according to your Instagram account, you're the hottest shit in the market right now. And they're like, yeah, no, I haven't worked in 2 months. And you're like, yeah, okay. So I decided that I should do a podcast. And so I started it essentially for my fans that I had at that time. And then also for my clients, because my clients always played ignorant. Like they were just like, oh, we don't know how long it takes to do this, or, so whenever you're charging for something, it's just like, why does it cost that much money? And so I was like, well, fuck you. I'm also going to do a show about process and how the shit works. I'm going to get people on the show to talk about how stuff works. And we're going to address you specifically, clients, and get you educated on this thing. So when I started the show back in Boston, I only did a few episodes every other month. And we only had a couple hundred followers, and it was just localized. Then the show started to pick up, and then the guests started to get bigger, and then people were listening to us all over the fucking world. And I had people in Ireland, I had people in South Africa, I had people all over the place that were listening to the show. And I went, oh, fuck. And then when COVID hit, I couldn't do anything on my films. And so I just dove in even deeper on the podcast because it kept me fucking sane. And when I moved out here to Los Angeles, I had access to the people that I loved and respected and want to work with. And so the next thing you know, I have the cinematographer from Dune on the show. I have the cinematographer that did all of the coolest fucking Guns N' Roses videos from the 90s on the show. And so now I get to meet these people as a peer and then start to have serious conversations about how they made it. And I start to sort of pull back the veil that I always had growing up as a kid. A friend of mine calls it 90s brain, where I would see David Fincher and I would see Spike Jonze. And I was like, all these guys had to do is go do a couple commercials, and now they're doing movies and everything's fucking great. Well, now I get to learn about what it's actually like for these dudes to do their job, which better suits. Then I'm not disappointed with myself, because then I put such unreal expectations on myself based upon whatever bullshit I saw from fucking like a behind the scenes video somewhere. And I created this whole false fantasy of what I thought this industry was. And I started to create like these markers in my life where it's like, well, at 35, I should do my first feature. And, and then you start to like write these rules based around bullshit. And so anyway, that was a long fucking answer to a short question. The point is that the podcast was started because I needed it personally, and then I needed it as a filmmaker 20 years before. And so I felt like it was a good way to give back to the folks around me, and it was a great way to keep myself learning and inspired and meeting people.
And it's funny to hear you say that, because I think a lot of times people think that, well, and I guess it's true, there is a lot of people who jump on the bandwagon of, I'm going to make a podcast because of X, Y, and Z, or I listened to Joe Rogan twice and now I'm going to interview people for no reason. But to hear you say like that, it was all kind of started that you needed it as much as I think other people need to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic dynamic. Is it something that you think you'll keep going with for a long time?
I mean, I plan to. Like right now, I have a movie in development that hopefully in the beginning of the year goes, which is a feature, and that's going to change my schedule a lot. And I'm trying to figure out a way to do this podcast at the same time as doing a feature. But I think I'm going to bring in a team, so the format may change a little bit, just because I got to be focused on the fucking movie. But yeah, man, I like it's been a good therapy for me.
Yeah.
And it's also been a great way to not only keep my current fans happy, but make new fans, and meet new folks and have great, like this really fucking cool community of artists. And it isn't just filmmakers. I mean, my show started as a filmmaker thing, but now like tomorrow's episode, I've got, what's his name? Oh my God, my brain just fucking froze. Hold on. This is what happens when I stay up too late. I have comic book artist Ben Bishop on the show, who draws for The Last Ronin, so the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle books. And so he was on the show, and I chatted with him about growing up loving comic books, and he got to meet a lot of his heroes, and like Eastman, who He was working closely with Eastman on this series. I mean, he worked with Eric Larson, who did like Savage Dragon and Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, and all that stuff. And so it's fun to talk to comic book artists. I have chefs on the show. I'm a barbecue guy. I'm a barbecue nut. And so I have barbecue pit masters on the show. And then years of doing music videos, I know musicians. I know the musicians' lifestyle. So I have those guys on the show, but then I'll have like, I did a whole episode with a battalion chief, fire chief out here on the fucking real story behind fires here in Los Angeles, because it was right around that Trump bullshit period of time where he's like, send people to sweep the woods. And I'm like, what the fuck? And so I got a battalion chief on, and he's a guy that was like, literally like, hold on, I'm going to take a break from fighting fires and I'll come on the podcast. And so then we talked about, what it's like, and why he thinks the fires are going, and physically from a guy who is stepping in the burnt, scorched land. He's like, okay, here's the reasons. And that's what I like about the show, is the show has become less about like, hey, you want to be a filmmaker, this is how you become a filmmaker, and more about, this is how we do our job, this is how we live our lives as humans, and this is how I survive through it. I like that about it.
Yeah, and I think it's extremely relatable. I think it's becoming easier, at least in the last little while, maybe, to notice people's bullshit and like the fake Instagram, like, hey, I'm Mike. I'm like Mike for the camera, and then actually you walk away and you're like, oh, fuck this. I don't believe in any of this shit I'm talking. I'm just doing it to try and whatever. And I think that's why the crossover, I guess, if you'd call it that, like, with chefs and different people coming on, you can really feel your sense of interest and passion for things like that. And I think that helps not only with, potentially lots of your audience being interested in similar things, but I find myself, even sometimes, if an episode pops up and it's maybe something that I wouldn't necessarily jump to and go, oh yeah, that thing, I find myself still being interested in it.
Oh, good.
I still want to hear it, and I like learn shit that I didn't think, or I'm like, oh yeah, I need to try that, or I need to see what that is, or other than the fact, obviously I think talent and content, the quality and how real it feels is obviously key to making something like that successful. As regards social media and stuff, is that something that you actively push? Is that something you're for or against? Like, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like social media as well seems to be like, for a lot of people, I see a lot of talented people out there, and it just feels like sometimes, it's like you're just spinning the wheel and hoping that some of your stuff will get seen.
Yeah, look, I think the best way to describe your fucking phone, I think the best way to describe Instagram, your phone, social media, it's a pack of cigarettes, right? And there are, most people are smoking a pack of cigarettes to get the fucking high from the nicotine, no matter what they're saying and no matter what they're doing. And so you pick up that pack of cigarettes because, I don't know, your friends did it, or maybe you were fucking huge, like, John Wayne fan, or like a fucking John McClane fan. And you're just like, that bit where he's smoking the cigarettes, the fucking coolest guy in the world. So you pick up the cigarette, you start to do that shit.
Yeah.
But, you talk to people that are smoking cigarettes, especially a lot of young kids that still do it. I'm like, the fucking cancers and all that other bullshit. And they're like, yeah, but it's a great social tool. So like, it's a great way to meet strangers, because you're like, hey, you got a cigarette, you got a light, you got a fucking thing. And so then you go out, you get to go have a smoke break, and you have your own little fucking community of people. And then in that community, you're sharing that. So I feel like Instagram, I feel like social media is like smoking cigarettes. It's not good for you. It's this dopamine addictive thing where, it's draining your time from your life, but it's also draining your emotions from your life. And it's like, it's got us so hopped up on like looking for gratification. I don't know if you've ever done that. Like, you've had days where you're on it so long that you just feel fucking shitty. You feel empty inside, and your body is just like, enough dopamine, man. What the fuck? And so I got a love and hate for it. I'm on it a lot because I use social media specifically for promotions, one way or another. it's promotions. It's either promoting the show, it's promoting my work, it's promoting the people that I want to work with, it's the people that I love. It's promoting what I eat. It's just building a vibe, because you need to do that today. That's where everybody is. More so, like, you go out in a fucking public and people are on their phone, like that's how people are communicating with folks. And then it's a great way to meet people. Like, I book most of my guests through Instagram. So most of my guests, as soon as I became verified on Instagram, it sort of changed everything for me, where now I'll write to people that are large folks and the blue check mark shows up and they go, who's this guy? And so that they'll actually respond. So I can write to big cinematographers. It's tough getting to actors. It's people that, obviously have like an inbox full of like, send me your nudes. You can't get through that pile of shit. But, I have like the production designer for the new Ghostbusters movie on in a couple of weeks. I've got the director for the new Texas Chainsaw movie on the next couple of weeks. So like that, all those dudes were booked through Instagram. So it's good. It's good. Like, there's that love and hate. The show would not be as successful as it is without social media and without the internet. Like, you and I won't know each other without it. So it's a love-hate thing, and you have to sort of train yourself. You have to train yourself on how to do it healthy. And there are times where I am being healthy, and there are times when I'm not being healthy with it. And then there hits a point where you could start to make money with it, and through sponsorships, through everything else, which is great. But fucking love and hate that. It's like having a smoking addiction, Yeah,
it really is. And it's something that always fascinates me, is trying to balance between like becoming maybe too obsessed with something like that to the point where it's like not good and potentially ruining other aspects, but then not giving it enough attention. It's tough.
It sucks, man. And I know a lot of people that run successful podcasts and stuff. Like, I know like Tom Segura, and I know those guys and the comedians. And he has a quote somewhere where he's like, someone said to him, like, do you ever feel like shit because you're posting, the ad for your show multiple times? And he goes, you have to. You post it one time and all your regular followers are like, I got it. But then the people that aren't on your fucking algorithm, they miss it. And so you have to post it 2 or 3 times for that algorithm to get to the point where they're showcasing it for you. And as content creators, we're slaves to these fucking algorithms, and we're slaves to these services where, like YouTube, the rules on, this is why I don't do YouTube shit. The rules on YouTube, where it's like, not only do you have to be posting regularly, but you have to post like 2 or 3 times a week. All your content has to be over 15 minutes long. That's why when you watch a lot of like these, you look up for training videos, or you look up, like how to cook a fucking steak. And the host of that video is like, let's give you a recap. And he's just talking all this bullshit for the first 5 minutes of the fucking video, just to make that time limit so that the algorithm will show it to his fans. And so now you're just creating content for free for this provider so that they can stay fucking pot. So it's this whole bullshit fucking pyramid scheme that most creators are stuck in these days, where you're either a slave to TikTok, you're a slave to fucking YouTube, you're a slave to all these different fucking outlets. And then you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I advertising? These people that do unboxing videos, it blows my fucking mind, where it's like, why would you go through the process of spending all your time to do an advertisement for this person for free? They fucking sent you a box full of their shit for nothing, which costs them $0. They already have a whole warehouse full of that shit. And you make them an ad where they already have a marketing budget that's a couple $100,000 fucking somewhere that they're not having to spend. It's just like, what the fuck? I don't know. You're on that shit.
Yeah, you're right though. And there's so many different pitfalls and different things that I see, and from being on different social medias and different platforms, you just see some of this stuff and it's like soul destroying.
Well, dude, and so then people will go, well, Mike, we listen to your show, we see your shit, you have sponsors on your show. I am very specific about my sponsors. I have attempted to do affiliates, and the affiliates with the larger companies sometimes pay, but most of the time they don't fucking pay. You're joining some pyramid scheme where it's like, we'll pay you per fucking click or whatever the fuck it is. And you're just like, after everything that I've done for you, what did I make? A couple $100? Go fuck yourself. Like, there hits this point where most sponsors that I talk to are companies that I enjoy, that I use. And I'm honest with these companies, and these companies are honest with me. So if I talk to them and I know that they're a small startup or they're not really a big fucking company, I'm like, I really like your shit. And I know the people that listen to my show could benefit from knowing that you guys exist. So sure, send me some product. And as we do this initially, it won't cost you that much. It won't cost you much to do this because I like you so much, and we'll go through that process. But then I have sponsors that I know make fucking loot. I'm just like, no, you pay. And then you get into this game of, well, how many fucking clicks and how many? No, you pay for it, because at the end of the day, your advertisements are baked on my episodes. So 4 years from now, when the shit goes through the fucking roof, you're still getting ads on the older episodes. So you pay for it. And I just don't think, what that comes down to is that comes down to confidence. And that's not an arrogant statement, because there are often times where I'm not confident in what I'm doing. It's just confidence that you need to have as a creator in the fact that, like, what I'm doing is worth this time. What I'm doing is worth this amount. And be honest with yourself. If you don't have an audience, if you don't have the people behind you to do these sort of things, build that. And understand that. And maybe you can find a sponsor that wants to go through the ride with you, or maybe you can find an audience that wants to go through the ride with you until you find your voice. Mm-hmm. But when on, you're just like, all right, I'm finding my voice. But then make sure that you're registering your success. And you're just like, holy shit, I've got this many viewers now. I've got this many listeners now. That means something. I have people writing to me, giving me feedback on like how long my intros are, or like what this means. That means people are engaging in this shit. Oh, this is becoming valuable now. This is a valuable fucking commodity. This is worth something,
Yeah, that's something. And I can't remember exactly where I'd seen it, but it might have been a guy. I don't know if you've ever heard of someone called Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary V.
No.
He's one of these like entrepreneur kind of guys. I'm not huge into a lot of his stuff, but I had seen he made a quote about things like podcasts and stuff, and he was like, always you have to put your value in the community you build, much like a lot of what you've said in this chat we've had. He kind of put the emphasis on, I would rather be the guy with 10,000 followers and 9,000 of them were super loyal and part of a community than have 9 million followers and 10 people actually engage and care.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of that comes from, how many people buy their fucking followers and shit from like follower farms in India. And as soon as you come out with a podcast, that stuff comes out of the fucking woodwork. I get messages all the time. Like, would you like fucking followers? And not just like, you fucking leeches. But at the end of the day, look, I said to myself that I would only do a show that gave advice for shit that I've done personally. Like, I would only go through the process of giving advice for things that I've done personally. And if it's something that I haven't done, I'd have someone on the show that would talk about it. And most of the time when you hear me talking to someone, like you hear me talking to someone that does something I don't do, you could probably hear me taking notes because I'm sitting there going, okay, cool. And most of the time when I get off air, I'm just like, dude, thank you for sharing all that stuff. And we start talking about stuff more off air. I'm just like, oh, cool. And then a lot of these guys I've become friends with, and then we are sharing stuff and asking questions as a community outside of what the podcast is, which is why I do the show. So when I see these dudes that are like these fucking like advice givers, or like, like how to get chicks, or like how to make cash, and then you just hear them regurgitating, they're just as thoughty as like,
it's true. It's like it's like a male OnlyFans thing.
Yeah, dude, it's just the same shit. It's like the girl that's just like, hey, check out my cat. And it's just all chest. And you're just like, that is the same thing. You guys are just looking for instant gratification. It's like if we're addicted to cigarettes, you guys are mainlining nicotine in your veins with what it is that you're doing here to get that dopamine rush to make you feel fucking important. And then when you actually meet these folks, it's so fascinating. I just saw, and I'm on a tirade, so let me know if I should.
No, you're good. This is great.
So I just saw the Anthony Bourdain doc. Mm-hmm. So the doc that came out. I love Anthony Bourdain. I've always loved him. I loved his books. Okay. I thought that his shows, No Reservations, and all those shows were beautifully done. I felt like knowing his career and how long it took for the shows to become really great. They're so well done. And his voice and his writing really spoke to me. And so when he died, it really fucked with us. And it really fucked with me, where I felt like an uncle died, where I was just like, God damn it. And so I watched this doc, and I wish I didn't. And the doc actually goes through and breaks down him as an individual further, and it starts to pull the veil. And then you start to, I remember I got halfway through the film and I'm like, I don't want to watch this. Why did I do this? Why am I deconstructing this? And why am I getting too much into the human behind this thing when I actually valued what he was saying? I valued what he was promoting, and I valued that stuff. And so it was this interesting reminder for me that no matter what, whether you're watching something on TV or you're listening to this microphone, it is being produced. It is being filtered. It is being made into something. And so don't assume that the person that you're listening to is exactly who you think they are through the production itself. Yeah. I will say that I'm pretty damn close, almost dangerously close to who I am on the microphone. And it's one of the problems I have when I do the show. My big joke is I always feel like a 15-year-old that found his dad's shotgun. I'm always concerned that I'm going to say something that's going to fucking ruin everything that I'm trying to build, because I don't have that filter. I don't have that thing that you're supposed to have. I think the most that I do, because I really don't edit the shows, that pretty much like a full conversation, and I'll cut out if a guest starts to say stuff that will hurt them or hurt their career path or something. I'm like, oh yeah, fucking take that out. Why are we doing this? I'm not here to ruin you. Yeah. So that kind of stuff will come out, but it's mostly stream of consciousness to its detriment, as you can see here, to the detriment.
I love it.
Of it. So yeah, I don't know, whatever. I don't know where the fuck I was going. See, this is what it is. This is what the show is.
I love that though. And I think that's why people, like myself and many others can relate, obviously career wise and work wise, maybe not, but like you said earlier, like there's an aspect of this, I think, that we've lost. That person on the other side of the screen is just as human as you are, and all that kind of stuff has been a little bit lost. Like you said, things like Instagram and all, everybody, only wants to show you their best side on Instagram. And to a degree, I get that. But then I think what we haven't realized is the effect that that's had on so many people. Like I have probably fallen victim to that. And I would think that I'm pretty self-aware, but I've also caught myself in real time going, wait a second now, it's like what's the analogy? It's there's two ways to build the biggest building in town. One is to build the biggest building, and the other one is to tear down all the other buildings.
Yeah.
And it's like sometimes I found myself getting caught, like not being true to me, maybe because I feel like, fuck this guy, or fucking why does he get this, or they're perfect. And that's just a dangerous route to go down.
Well, dude, yeah, because then I think a lot of that, that's so interesting because it happens in our business a lot, where you get jealous, right? So you see something and you're just like, how come this asshole gets to do this thing? And it seems like from the outside that they had essentially handed to them.
Yeah.
is you're buying into whatever the fucking story pitch is. I'll tell you this, when I finally make my movie and it's fucking great, then the press is going to be like, this guy came out of nowhere. His first fucking film. It's fucking it's like the assholes. I've been doing this for like 20 years.
20-year overnight success.
Yeah. So like, it's the same thing. Like we also process, for instance, there's this, I was just reading about this. Oh, I'm on a tirade. I was just reading about one of the new movies that's coming out. I can't say what movie it is, but it's a new movie that's coming out. And there was this big article on a reputable website that was like, first test screening happens last weekend, and the audience responds like this, and they're just trying to decide whether or not a character is going to go into it. And I go, that's bullshit. I know that's bullshit because I was in the test screening that happened 4 months before that test screening. So that's fucking bullshit. And these are consistent things that we're reading about. And we're buying them as reality. Like, and that's such a smaller version of a larger fucking problem when you start to talk about like, this is how I should look. This is how I feel about other people. These are the social issues that I should be riled up about. You start to work in the advertising business, which I've done for years, and do commercials. You understand how folks are monetizing, social issues, how it's just as important for these businesses to rile you up because they make just as much money if you're riled up or they make more money because you're now involved with their social outlets. You're now involved with their shit. So on top of being like, hey, these fucking people matter, but also I'm going to buy these sneakers at the same fucking time. Like all that stuff becomes the marketing scheme, even down to motion pictures and movies. And like, the only way to promote a movie successfully these days is to somehow rope it into social messaging. The first film ever with this community of people on the fucking, and you're just like, no, it's not. that's existed since the 70s. And it's just what you're saying. All right. Yeah. So it's we live so much through these damn things, and this is our filter. These are our glasses for reality right now, that we forget that we're looking through fucking funny glasses, and we're seeing, everything's filtered. I did a post recently because I subscribe to Adobe products. Like I'm recording right now in Adobe Audition. They don't sponsor me, but I subscribe to their shit. They sent me an email saying, we have Photoshop for the phone. And so I was like, all right. So I download Photoshop for the phone, and it's just this fucking thought app where you're sitting there and it will automatically select and recognize your eyes, your nose, your face, your chin, and the whole ordeal. And then on a slider scale,
you can
very similar to like a slot machine, eyes change, eyes widen, nose change, boom, 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 boom. And it happens so quick. And then when you're doing it, it's addictive because you're like, well, I don't know, are the eyes the right position and it's the nose. And so I did a couple videos, and I'm not the first one to do it, but I did a couple videos online just showing you how fucking ridiculous this is and how easy it is to do these things. So everything you're seeing, and now with these new transcription programs, everything you're hearing can be false. With the new transcription programs, I could take an ass load of clips of Obama doing speeches, feed it to a transcription program, and then sit down on a Word document and write an entire interview with Obama, and then put out a podcast tomorrow that says, Obama is the guest on my show, and have this AI do his entire voice. Everything that I've written on a fucking a document.
It's a very strange thing. I had seen a couple of months back, there was like a deep fake Tom Cruise that had went viral. Scary, man. And like really scary. I was like, I had to double take this thing multiple times. I was like, what the? It's like,
yeah, dude. Yeah. And now it's being done in movies. So like if you saw the new Ghostbusters movie, you're like, yeah, it's great, but do they really need to bring Harold Ramis back as it's fascinating, and there's ethics involved. I think Jon Favreau had a really interesting interview with that, where he was like, we have to figure out some sort of watermarking system in order to watermark the authenticity of a person's voice or a person's image. NFTs, I guess, are kind of doing that, but there has to be some sort of accountability because we only know about it because we exist in a period of time before that existed.
Mhm.
So we're just like, this is fucked up. Like I grew up when there was a goddamn landline in my house through my whole teenage years. Like I didn't have a cell phone until I was like a fucking early 20s. And so as that technology gets faster and faster, and you have these new generations that are born into this technology and into this manipulation, it's scary as fuck, you know.
It really is when you, and especially when you dig down into it, there's so many levels and there's so many different avenues.
God, dude. And when you work in this business, and it's our job to manipulate people. And I hate to say it that way, but it is. Like, even if you're doing a horror movie, I'm manipulating you to be scared of, if you saw this footage without the sound design or the music in it, you'd go, this isn't fucking scary. I've manipulated your senses to make it scary for you using techniques. And, the argument is that we've been doing this since movies were created, with sound and visuals and all that kind of stuff. And now with 3D and all this new Unreal technology and getting to the point where you're directing digital actors, and it's going to be fucking nuts, man. It really is going to be a weird. I wonder what kind of revolution is going to come out of it, where people are just like, I wonder if it's going to go too far and people like, it's all bullshit. Like there's going to have to hit a point where the audience is like, fuck all of this, because I can't trust anything. And the commodity that will be like direct communication will be such a validating commodity at that point. I don't know, whatever. I'm getting fucking.
I feel like, COVID kind of gave glimmers of that. Now I know everybody will probably ultimately just go back to the same old shit again, but I always have visions of like the Terminators or some shit taking over the world. It's like Cyberdyne.
There's a piece of me that will, go like, yeah, maybe eventually, we'll be sitting next to Morpheus and it'll be like, this is the reality. But the truth of going through COVID was that the real version of that stuff, like everything, the real version of seeing someone die in real life is so unepic. Like seeing I've seen multiple folks go, and there's nothing epic about it. I think the most epic thing is how it affects us emotionally. It's not, it's like unplugging a fucking computer. And so I think with going through COVID and seeing how that post-apocalyptic event was, which was like us in our fucking sweat, I started wearing sweatpants. Like that was the result of that. I wasn't running from robots. I was putting on sweatpants, and I don't think it's going to be as loud and as Hollywoodized as we would hope it would be. I just think it's like everything else, basic and simple. And yeah, all right, that happened.
Yeah, I do think that. Do you have any comfort horror movies or a movie? I used to always ask, favorite horror movies, and I feel like that's a bit too difficult for a start, but I am more intrigued by, I guess, comfort movies, or, is there anything that you find yourself, you put on in the background, you watch multiple times, you find yourself going back to it? Doesn't have to be an amazing movie. Like a lot of the ones I do that with are considered absolute trash by everybody else.
What are your movies first?
Let me see. Let me think of one that's really considered trashy. Halloween Resurrection.
That one is trashy. That is a trashy one.
And I love like road movies. I think it's called Joyride over with you guys. It's a Paul Walker movie.
Yep, I know that one.
Vacancy with those, like those kind of movies. Like I wouldn't call them great movies at all, but I find myself putting them on.
It's funny when you ask this question. It's almost like signing up for like ancestry.com. It's like I start to understand your age just based on the movies that you're choosing. I start to understand a lot of stuff. Yeah, I think that everybody has that stuff because we are so obsessed with television, and television and movies have become such a part of our life since the 70s, and it has been this thing. Even before that. For me, I would say number one movie that's comfort for me. The series, any Godzilla movie is a comfort piece for me. And I think out of the entire series, the Return of Godzilla, or Godzilla 1985, the US version, I put that fucking thing on, and it's just, there's a sense of nostalgia, but there's also a sense of inspiration. There's all sorts of stuff that happened. And the movie's not the best film ever made. I think it's the best Godzilla movie, but I just recently saw it in the theater for the first time. Like Alamo Drafthouse was fucking playing it here, and I got to go. Oh, that was so much fun. So Godzilla, I would say The Thing for sure. 100% The Thing. Alien, 100% Alien. Let me think about outside the genre. I would say Die Hard used to be a thing for me, but then Die Hard became like everybody's favorite Christmas movie. And I'm like, come on. The first Lethal Weapon, I think, is a great one.
Yeah. That was something I used to get asked all the time. Or somebody would ask me, what movie do you think you've seen more than any other movie? And people were always quite shocked because it wasn't actually a horror movie. I would say that my probably number one comfort movie, even still to now, and when I say comfort and then say the name of this movie afterwards, like what is Pulp Fiction?
Oh yeah, no, I get that.
And I can't even pinpoint, but it ties back into something you said earlier about people getting addicted to cigarettes, and you mentioned John McClane, and he looks so cool. And now I don't smoke. I didn't pick up smoking, but I remember certain scenes from. So here's an example. Before I used to be, I wasn't a vegetarian, but I used to be freaked out by the idea of like burgers from like fast food places.
Oh yeah.
And the scene in that movie where he takes the guy's burger and gets a bite of it and whatever actually prompted me to go and have my first ever burger from somewhere like McDonald's or whatever it was. So I definitely get what you're saying with that thing, and the same with the cigarettes. Like they make it seem so.
Yeah, no, it's weird, and a lot of it is like oral fixation stuff. Like you look at Steve. Like a lot of these guys all want to be Steve McQueen. So you go back and you look at old Steve McQueen movies. Was it The Dirty Dozen or it wasn't The Magnificent Seven? Was it The Magnificent Seven? He was in a movie with a bunch of other really great cast members. I think he was like James Caan, like a really great list of cast members. And there's this one shot where they're all riding horses, and the camera's sort of on a master, and they ride through this fucking river, and they cross the frame. And like they literally just sort of leave it so that you see the seven guys. And there was this joke that a lot of the cast had after seeing the shot where McQueen rides the same way the rest of the dudes do, but as he hits the riverbed, he sort of takes his hat off and like scoops up some water and puts his fucking hat back on, and it has this moment, and he steals it. And everything that he's ever done, you see him like eating and Bullet. You see him doing The Getaway. His motions. I think he was smoking The Getaway. Was he smoking The Getaway? But he's influenced everybody. So like you look at Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt's like the king of eating. Like he's in scenes and he's, you know what I mean? And he's always doing shit with his mouth. And those are like, we're constantly, as directors and filmmakers, we're constantly trying to get you to identify with somebody. Always, no matter what they're going through. Could be this guy that's got to fight a fucking bear. And it's just like, I have no idea what that's like, but I know what it's like to eat a sandwich, and I watch him eat a sandwich. It's like anytime I watch Blade Runner and fucking Deckard sits down and has a fucking thing of noodles, I have to pause it and go make myself a thing of ramen. Like I just have to. Like I didn't get to do it before I left the East Coast, but what I wanted to do was like I used to put on screenings for my friends, and we'd rent out theaters and do stuff. And there was this really cool noodle house in Chinatown that had big TVs. I was going to rent out the whole noodle house and just play Blade Runner.
That would have been kick ass.
Just eat noodles and fucking watch Blade Runner. But yeah, man.
It's a very bizarre concept though, that something like that can make you, it's physically affected me now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what my dad used to say when I was a kid, which I never agreed with him on, was he was like, TV's going to fuck with your brain. It's going to fuck with your brain. It's going to fuck with your senses. It's going to. And I was like, shut up. That was like the whole thing between our parents at that time, where TV's going to rot your brain. It's like, it's not going to rot my brain. But at the end of the day, he was correct. Like, the influence that these movies and that these characters and that these settings had on me as a human being are tenfold. Like, my idea of relationships and my idea of like how to be a man, fucking John McClane, and like going to do shit for his, like chasing down these terrorists to prove to his ex-wife that he still loves her because he doesn't know how to convey love. He doesn't know how to convey emotion. That was a fucking huge thing for me. Or like, Ghostbusters, the fucking dudes putting together, like a bunch of friends getting together and putting together business. We're going into business for ourselves. That fucking mantra was in my brain when I started my first business. That was probably like, I wanted the fucking firehouse. Like, I found an office that was like the firehouse. And it was because I grew up watching these things and being obsessed with wanting to live that hero's life. And it's a fascinating world that we currently live in because of everything that's going on with cancel culture and the positives and negatives of all of that stuff and the deconstruction of our heroes. It's a fascinating thing to be somebody that was grown up and affected by these heroes and by these people on such an emotional level and on a life level, and then having that stuff being torn apart. It's interesting. And I've talked about it on the show. I share all this stuff. I started recently going and doing therapy just because of COVID and depression and everything else, and sort of processing all that. And I've been talking to the therapist about this. This is a big deal with men right now, and men in America right now, is the deconstruction of their heroes and how it's affecting them emotionally. And it's fucking weird, man. It's a weird, fascinating thing.
And it's something I think that, and just from hearing you talk about it for the last couple of minutes, it is something really that's always been there and been ingrained, but we're only starting to peel back the layers. And it's so much more than, because I'm sure at one time, if you had said something like, I'm a huge fan of Ghostbusters, whatever, maybe some people couldn't even pinpoint exactly why or how much it actually potentially affected their outlook on a certain thing or whatever. And then somebody who, doesn't believe in that stuff or whatever will look at that and go like, what are you, fucking idiot? It's like, what, you think you're going to be a Ghostbuster? It's like, no, that's not. It's so much.
Well, yeah, it's not being a Ghostbuster.
Yeah.
It's learning about, Venkman's bravado. It's the fact that he walks into the apartment and he goes over while he's charming this lady, goes over to a piano, goes, blah, 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 and he's unafraid to be an idiot and be an asshole. And he does this bit that fucking affected me so hard, man. Like, and it's so stupid to say this out loud, but in like early relationships, I would train myself to have that same sense of bravado, to be like, yeah, and it's subconscious. It really is. And it really gets in there and really shifts and changes you. And now that we're saying this out loud, it's also interesting now where you're seeing such a change in guard with who leads are in movies and women getting more roles in movies and all that kind of stuff. Because it must have been fascinating to grow up in that time period and not be represented and not have, everybody's obsessed with Venkman and all of these male centric characters, not have that same thing. Although, Ripley existed and there's a bunch of good stuff, but it must have been fascinating. It must have been fascinating.
Yeah. I have a couple of quick fire questions before I let you go. Do you have a dream guest for the podcast?
Arnold Schwarzenegger. Seriously, I've been trying to get through to him. And of course, he's one of those guys that has that inbox, send me your nudes. Yeah. It's really hard to get through to Arnold. But I think it would be, and if I had him on the show, my first question would be like, mini ponies. What's the fucking deal with the mini ponies? Because he's got his mini ponies. But yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger would be fun.
That's good. I love that answer. If you could write or direct a movie within an existing IP, what would you choose and why? Whether it be horror or otherwise.
Yeah, no, there's like it's tough because a lot of the stuff that I want to do has been done. Like I got a couple answers and I'll put these out. So I'd love to do, if I was to do a series, I'd love to do a Ghost in the Shell series and do a Ghost in the Shell series the way I liked Ghost in the Shell, which was like more of a procedural kind of thing.
Mhm.
Years ago, I did a proof of concept that got kiboshed by fucking Marvel for the Punisher. I had a really great idea for Punisher stuff. That's not saying that the Punisher series wasn't great or that I didn't think it was great, because I thought there was a lot of good stuff in the Punisher series. But I think there's a good movie to be made in that. And then, hold on, there was something that I just had. It was, I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street would be fun.
I feel like that needs it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are pushing for it. I don't know if the rights no longer are with Michael Bay, but I think there are a lot of folks that are pushing for that right now. I know that Spectrovision has been making an active effort, and they've said that publicly.
Actually, on the topic of that, here's a question. So if Nightmare on Elm Street were to come back, you as a fan, as a filmmaker, whichever, Robert England, which I think is Freddy to me, but okay, he's not going to come back. Who would you cast?
If I wasn't using him?
Yeah.
I think the trick of doing that movie is to go back to what I think the core of why Wes Craven made that film. And it all comes back to that drunk that he saw out that window with the fedora hat as a kid and that scary fucking dude. So I think that I'd probably cast an unknown. And I would find somebody that could transform the character, very similar to how Skarsgård did for It.
Yeah.
Really character for himself. But then I think the movie, at least the first in that series, you wouldn't see much of the character. It wouldn't be about the bravado and the personality of Freddy. It would be more about the fear of the dream world. And I think it would be the pure, like, I think the best parts of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise were when people were struggling not to go to sleep and then they were asleep. And so like that breaking of reality and that breaking of where you're at, I think that's the fun stuff to do and really sort of build up, like they did in the first one, like build up the essence of Freddy and the razor blades and the fucking all that kind of shit. Really build that up without getting too, Dream Warriors with it, which is like, or what was the one where he became the giant fucking worm and he was eating her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, at that point, it's like, okay.
But I think if you get to the core of the scariness of it, and here's the other thing too. If you're going to do a movie about kids, I'd do a movie with kids, like real kids, like not like 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-olds pretending to be 17-year-old kids. And not like the sequences where it's like, here's the hot chick that, is banging the dude and she's hot. And that's why we're watching this thing. Or here's the 23-year-old fucking stud that's the fucking football player. It's almost like you want to go more like, I always reference this movie, Gus Van Sant's Elephant. You ever see Elephant?
Possibly. That's
what about the school shootings, and he cast all like these kids. He cast like these strange real kids. I think it'd be fun to do that, like cast. So when you see these kids dying, you're just like, fuck. You're not like doing body counts. You're just like, fuck, God damn it. Don't go to sleep. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that would be fun to do that in a weird way.
Obviously filmmaking is your number one passion. What is, because I'm not 100% sure what we can actually talk about and speak about and what we can't. So I kind of wanted to put that over to you as regards the status of things now. What can people look forward to? What does the future look like?
Yes. So I sent you, did you end up watching? You saw the proof of concepts, right? Did you end up seeing 12 kilometers? Did I send you both? Did I send you Who's There in 12?
Yeah.
Nice. Before I answer that question, what'd you think? Putting you on the spot.
Amazing. and genuinely, because I was like, going in, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go into this now with like normally I try to go down like a huge rabbit hole and like find out every little thing beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And I have stuff I want to ask, but I don't know.
Ask
where we're at with those things. Are we going to see more from them? Is this stuff going to go into development, like, and become a?
So what's going on is both films are in development. 12 Cam is in development with Ridley Scott's company. So Scott Free is producing that. I'd be directing that. Will Simmons is my writing partner. He's written a really great version. He saw my short and he was like, I'd love to take a pass at a feature. And I'm like, well, I wrote something, but let me read your work. And he sent me his work and I'm like, oh, dude, you're a fucking better screenplay writer than I could ever be. So I was lucky to get him. So he wrote a really interesting version of 12 Cam, which takes place later. So those of you who haven't seen the short, because I don't put it online, the only way you can see the short is if you write to me and send me your 3 favorite horror movies. And if I agree with you, I'll send you a link to the short. And so that movie takes place in the 1980s, which you saw. And that's about a Russian drill team based on a true story that dug the deepest hole known to man in the Kola Peninsula of Russia. And they dredge up something out of this hole that fucks with them. I did that whole movie in Russian. I don't speak Russian. I don't speak the language. And I did that movie because I was the producer and I hate it when I watch American films that are just like American actors doing Russian accents for stuff. And I thought that the Russian language is a scary fucking language to listen to. I also found it interesting to have the audience not know what the actors are saying unless they read the subtitles. And it forced me to direct that film like a silent film, honestly. So I tried to design that movie through their body language and everything else, where if you're watching it, you still know what the fuck's going on. And then if you read the subtitles add to it. And I also had another plan where I was like, I can also change, I was also being very manipulative. I'm like, I can change whatever the fucking subtitles, whatever I want, because most people don't know Russian. I didn't do that, but that was my initial thing. So that movie then went on to get attention out here. I pitched that to every major studio or every major production company out here, rather. And then we went with Scott Free, and very exciting to have, like, Ridley has seen it. He likes it. Like, it's fucking crazy. That movie requires more time and money. So it's a bigger budget. Mm-hmm. And so this would be considered my first film, even though I've been directing for fucking 20 years. This would be my first movie. And so in the interim, while I went around and I pitched that movie to a bunch of different studios, places that I want to work with, I asked one of them while I was in the space, they turned it down. They're like, yeah, it's not really for us. And I go, well, what is? And this production company was like, well, we kind of have a formula for what we like and what we don't like. And so they told me their formula. And I went back to my writing partner and I said, look, can we just do an exercise and we'll work within the formula? And if we come up with something great, cool. If we don't, whatever. Mm-hmm. And we came up with Who's There. And so we wrote the short film. I had it written, shot, edited, and put together in 3 months. So the short film was done in 3 months. And then Will was like, I'm going to write the feature. And so he dove in hard on the feature film. And I came back out here because I was still on the East Coast. I came back out here to Los Angeles to work on 12 cam, and my agents and stuff, I walked in the room and I was like, bam. I was just like, here's a movie, here's a script, bam, bam. And they were just like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, whole other movie. And so I handed them that, and we went out and pitched that film. And I'm not allowed to say yet the two epic, I could tease it on your show, the two epic horror production companies that are developing this movie. Epic. Let me just say, it would be like if you took the biggest stadium rock metal band and put it with the most current underground punk rock band. Those two companies, as horror film companies, are co-producing Who's There. And that one I think is going to go first. So hopefully, if everything goes as planned, we'll be doing that in the new year in January.
Big stuff then. Big stuff. That I had a follow-up question, which was, what are some of your goals and targets going forward? Obviously, you've had a long career doing many different things. You've had a taste of nearly everything probably at this point.
Yeah.
What are the goals? Is that the
dude? I mean,
the next
dude, out of everything, yeah. Like it's just, it's like every ounce of what I'm doing right now. Like I wish I could show you. Like I'm surrounded by storyboards, so I'm just storyboarding sequences from this movie, and then I've been, dealing with two great producers. And going through the process, and Will has written such a fucking fantastic, I hate promoting it this hard, but I'm going to. Will has written such a fantastic script. Most scripts like this have like 3 set pieces. This one has like fucking 12. Like there's so many sequences in this movie that if we can get them all in, oh my God. And if I could shoot this movie the way that we're planning to shoot this movie, it's fucking good.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited for that. Okay, so 2 final things. Do you have any rituals or processes that you use to get shit done, to put it bluntly? A lot of people that follow me, always reach out and ask about, and I'm not even necessarily ask me, but ask me to ask certain guests and different people. You seem like somebody who is pretty good at getting shit done and being able to kind of navigate do you have any particular rituals or processes to keep you in that gear?
Yeah. I mean, the simplest thing in the world to do is you just make to-do lists. What I do every Monday or Sunday night or Monday is I'll make a to-do list for the week, and it'll just be everything. It'll be like, these episodes, these emails, change your fucking oil, like all that shit. And the trick with to-do lists isn't just putting all like the big things on there. You're not putting all like the heavy hitters, like make a feature, because you're never going to cross that off. Like, when are you going to get to that point? So you have to put things on that to-do list, like, clean out my inbox, or, do your laundry, shit that you can cross off. So as you're progressing through that week, and by the end of the day, you're just like, you feel accomplished. You're just like, bam. Not only did I get like 5 boards done today for storyboarding, but I also recorded and produced a podcast. And I also, when we finish the show today, I'm going to buy on my list, I have to go buy a Christmas tree. So today's a Christmas tree purchase. So to-do lists are your guidance for most of it. And then the other trick is, and I don't do it enough, but when you go to sleep, because trying to get sleep when you do this business is really tough. Before you go to bed, if you sit and you monitor, or you go through your to-do list and you cross off what you've done that day, and then you add what you need to add for tomorrow before you go to bed, then it's easier to relax, because then you don't feel like you're going to forget your tasks that you need to do. I think that's the best advice I can give to anybody. To-do lists, once I started to do them years ago, it really changed my productivity, and it gives you a path. It gives you a purpose.
Yeah, and I feel like the physical act of being able to cross out or tick off something from the list, it kind of gives you that little boost to kind of, oh, actually, you know what? I finished this a little bit early. Let me get this thing done, or let me do that. Whereas I think if you don't have a clear cut idea, it's just like, oh fuck, I'll do whatever. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll stay on my phone for 5 hours.
I did. It's bad. And through COVID, I hit a point where I would write my to-do list. I'm like, I don't want to look at it. And so there was a couple of days where I wouldn't even look at tackle my to-do list. I don't feel like I'm as good with it as I used to be. And I'm trying to get back on that path again because COVID kind of instilled a lot of negative fucking rhythms, because it's like, well, what's the purpose of doing all that stuff? And you got to get out of that mindset, which I think is really important.
So before I ask my final question, I want to say thanks again for taking a lot of time out of your day to do this. I think this will be really beneficial to a lot of my audience and a lot of people out there, I hope. It's been a pleasure. Where can people find you, or where would you like to direct people to? All the links will be down below on all the platforms that this is on, but just from you yourself, where would you like people to go?
The best place, honestly, I'm on Instagram all the time. And I read almost all of my messages. And sometimes it gets, I'm constantly trying to keep up with my inbox so that it doesn't get too deep. And sometimes folks get deep and they have to rewrite. Just be persistent, I think. And then if you go to my Instagram, that's where I'm talking about everything. And that's where I'm usually communicating. If you want to see my work, if you want to see the trailers for those 2 films that we talked about, you can go to mikepecci.com. There you'll see the trailers. And then if you like how many times I've dropped the F-bomb in the past hour and you want to continue that in your life, then you can just go listen to the podcast. And that's In Love with the Process. You can go to inlovewiththeprocess.com. I've curated all the episodes there based upon subject material, or you can follow us on fucking Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on whatever podcast delivery device you use. You'll find us on there.
All the links will be down below. So for anybody listening, all the links for my stuff will be down there. Final question. Why horror? And what does it mean to you?
Why horror? Simple answer is that I'm an older brother and I like to tease. I mean, it's like horror is one of the formats that you get the most response out of an audience with. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, it is one of the other movies that still survive in theaters, and it isn't just superheroes, which I never thought I'd grow up to say that it isn't just superheroes, but it's true. I got into horror because I like to manipulate folks when they go to see the movie. I like to ramp you up. I like to play with your senses. I like to, make you feel scared, and I like to give you that rush, that adrenaline rush that everybody loves. And I like to make horror is exciting. Horror has rabid fans for a reason. And horror is also one of these few genres where technique is respected. Yeah. Like the technique of filmmaking, like the horror fans are obsessed with Sam Raimi's camera movements, obsessed with his editing style. And those are the regular fucking fans that are obsessed with that stuff. So it's a very rewarding place to play. It really is. And I'm very much looking forward to finally, I cannot fucking wait to make this movie. And luckily, because of the folks that I'm teaming up with, I am lucky enough to step into an existing fan base with these folks and just go, let me prove to you that I am worth being here. And that to me is exciting and challenging and scary and fun. And that's why I'm happy to be doing horror.
That's I'm probably, no, well, I was going to say I'm more excited to see this than you are to make it, but I got to be on first in line to see that when things do finally come together. Like I said, Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure that I've taken 2 hours of your time already. I could probably take 20 hours of your time. You seem to have so much knowledge, stories, different things like that. Maybe we can do it again next year. Sure. If we get some closer, maybe can talk a little bit more in detail about certain things.
Sure, man. Yeah. Reach out. And I've appreciated this. I always love being a guest on someone else's show because I have to do less work. So it's
just talk. Yeah, I could see that. But like I said, man, it's been a pleasure. I wish you all the best. Have a good Christmas, a good New Year, and yeah, peace.
Peace, man.
Evil wears many masks, but pure horror wears only one. Support First Class Horror on Patreon for as little as $1. Can't get enough of the horror? Carve yourself a deal from official merchandise, only on Teespring. Join us on all social media at First Class Horror. We have such sights to show you.